hearts change their minds. And I was sort of alluding to my partner wanting to no longer be with me. But in years past, I've reflected on that and realized, my heart changes its mind. The things that I wanted, the dreams that I have, the desires, the levels and the standards of integrity and relationship that I hold for myself, my heart changes its mind. And so I need to honor that. And it's so annoying that you need to honor that because it's a form of suffering not to.
You're listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and the aim of this podcast is pretty simple: to support you in building rock-solid foundations, legendary integrity, and kick-ass relationships with plenty of stories, a load of lessons, and a solid dose of some loving straight talk. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Legends podcast. I'm your host, Mike. Start it again. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Legends podcast. I am your host, Mike Campbell, and today it is my great pleasure to welcome back onto the show a good friend of mine, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg. Jer was on the show. That's me doing my best to pronounce it more like an American, Jer. In episode 10. So if you haven't listened to that episode 10 with Jeremy, then, you don't have to, but you might want to go back and listen to it. It'll give you a really good history into him. We kind of just pick up where we leave off almost, a lot more comfortable with the conversation. We have to do the intros and get you guys kind of down on who he is. We explore quite a few things in here. We explore the shedding of skins and kind of stepping into the new evolutions of us. We talk about, making better choices. We talk about choosing your suffering and, pleasure, and actually what that looks like in terms of longer term meaning and all these kind of things. Jer has a beautiful presence to him and a wonderful way of making points and telling stories. And I absolutely love this man and appreciate him and his way of bringing words and stories to life and lessons to life. So I trust that you'll get something out of this and you'll enjoy it, and make sure you share this with some men in your life as well. And if you don't follow Jer, then make sure you do. Find the show notes and we'll put the links to him in there. And now on to the show. Hey, a quick message from me before we get into this episode. You might not know this, but about 3/4 of the people who listen to this podcast haven't yet hit the follow button. Now, if you have got anything from this podcast, if you enjoy it, if it helps you in the past, my request, my suggestion is come and hit that follow button. Then not only will you get access to episodes first, but also it means it will get in front of more people. The bigger the show gets, the bigger the guests get, and the more men that we can support. So hit that follow button and enjoy this episode.
Are you going to use this? Are we doing it?
I don't know.
Is this live? Yeah, fuck it.
All right, let's go. Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, welcome back to the show. You are, the third person, I think, to come back to the show. So hugely grateful to have you here.
You invited 2 other people back before me, Mike Campbell?
You had to go there.
I'm offended.
I think it might be in order. Groves was on before you. He came back before you.
No, it's
hey,
fair.
but look, we just, spoiler alert, I have no idea how this will order in the play of things, but we just had a little mini conversation for another piece, which you did before Groves, if you want to get jealous about it.
I think the word's petty.
Oh, okay.
I want to get petty about it. Yeah. But honestly,
I'm going to take my toys. I set up this light for you, and I'm going to fucking go home.
It's great to be back. Love what you've done with the place. Always a pleasure to see you. Yeah. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. Now, in preparation for this conversation, Jeremy, I've been living my whole life, but also I listened back to part of our first conversation. And interestingly, towards the end of the conversation, you did your homework and you went back and listened, of course. And there was a piece where we both kind of spoke about, like, that's a rabbit hole we could go into. Maybe we could explore next time. And I was like, well, fucking hell, it feels like we probably should follow that next time. You want me to take you there?
Sure. I trust you.
Okay. So my best kind of summary of what we were exploring was we had been discussing, and hey guys, if you're listening to this, then and you haven't listened to the first one, go back and listen. But we were kind of exploring this idea of like authenticity and being oneself, and perhaps the challenge, the fucking terror and everything that comes with taking off the masks of perhaps who I have maybe been in certain circumstances, and just being oneself more. Now, I to jog your memory, we'd been talking about this, and I said, this is something I really see in you, and I really appreciate it. How real and dear you are. I did my best to give that a more American pronunciation, the shortening of your name. And I said, kind of like, what's behind that in essence? And you said, laziness. I should have asked you then and see if you said the same thing. You said it's laziness. Like, it's just so much fucking easier just to not have different modes and masks and kind of personas. And it's really, laziness drives a lot of it. It's easier. Does that still feel accurate?
Yeah, even when you were describing that, I was thinking in my head, it's because I'm a lazy bastard. I wonder where he's going with this. But yeah, it's just ease.
Yeah. So then we started to explore the like, in essence, if that hasn't been your mode, but it's a popular idea, authenticity, right? And I think it's been bastardized a lot, like it's authentic and it's like a cry for help or something. But we spoke about the unknown, what that is for a lot of people, to actually step into being more of who you are, and how that's very foreign concept for a lot of people. That's kind of where we got to. We were like, this is a whole subject we could dive into. So we're like, okay, well, let's dive into it. Was that an experience that you personally had? Like, oh shit, I'm not necessarily being myself over here and over here, and then there was potentially a precipice of, I'm gonna try on my Jeremy Goldberg skin for the most part.
Yeah, let's talk about snakes, Mike. So snakes, they shed their skin, right? They get bigger, and as they grow, they turn dull. Their eyes kind of cloud. They can't see as good. And then they go away and they hide in the dark, and they shed their skin. They outgrow their skin, literally. And then they emerge, and they're shiny, and they look brand new, and they're polished. And I feel like we as humans do the same thing. And so many times in my life, I have felt like I have outgrown my skin. I feel like I have outgrown my jobs. I've outgrown my career trajectory, which I had spent a decade pursuing. I've outgrown relationships. I've outgrown girlfriends. And part of the process of that, at least for me, has been to recalibrate my sense of self. And when you talk about being more yourself, I think the preliminary step there is to actually understand who you are. It's very difficult to be more of something if you have no idea what that something is, how that something feels, what that something does, right? And so there have been parts of my life where I've very consciously chosen to have a conversation, end a relationship, pursue a different path. And not once has that felt easy in the short term, but it has created a significant amount of ease in the medium to long term, because I push myself more towards a path of integrity and truth and honesty, as much as I didn't want to be in that place. And so when I talk about authenticity being easy, it's also extremely hard. And it's one reason that a lot of people don't do it, is because it requires strength and courage and honesty and integrity and taking action when you know you need to take action. And all of those things kind of suck, if we're being honest, at least in the short term, in my experience. So yeah, I think that is one component of it. A second component of it is, years ago, I was going through a breakup, and I was really trying to tease out the trajectory of my life. And I took my journal down to the beach in the morning, and I was looking out at the sea, And I just wrote 4 words on my page, and it was simply hearts change their minds. And I was sort of alluding to my partner wanting to no longer be with me. But in years past, I've reflected on that and realized, my heart changes its mind. The things that I wanted, the dreams that I have, the desires, the levels and the standards of integrity and relationship that I hold for myself, my heart changes its mind. And so I need to honor that. And it's so annoying that I need to honor that. Because it's a form of suffering not to, is the other side of all. I'm just going to ramble. You just cut me off. We'll have touch your nose 3 times if you're like, bro, shut up, you're way off track. But it is a form of
There's
suffering.
no track at this point.
Yeah, I've already eliminated that option. We're just wandering through the desert together, desert of my brain. But so it's a form of suffering to have those hard conversations. It's a form of suffering to change, to reflect, to end, to begin. It is a form of suffering to do all those things that require newness and spontaneity and alterations. It's another form to stagnate and remain in safety and remain comfortable. That's a different kind of suffering. And so one thing that I'm a big proponent of is to choose better suffering, and to choose suffering that is more in integrity, that feels more alive, that's more exciting, more fulfilling, healthier. And that's kind of been my path over the last, decade or so, is to attempt to pursue the best kinds of suffering on any given day.
So has it been, perhaps your ability has grown over time, has it been an easy thing to kind of tune into, what was the more effective, the better form of suffering, and why? Why choose this one over this one? Was there clarity there? Has it been challenging to get clarity on those pieces?
Yeah, I think that's been the practice, is to really hone my intuition. When I talk about intuition, I describe it as a heart whisper. I don't know if I spoke of that last time, but this idea that heart whispers and fear shouts is another 4-word little fortune cookie that I live my life by. And what I mean by that is the heart whisper is like, psst, hey, take a chance, psst, quit your job, psst, leave your marriage, psst, ask that person out, psst, write a book. And so that deep inner knowing is something that we all have and that we all have access to. But unfortunately, through a variety of reasons, whether that's familial, culturally, societally, we lose that profound fluency, and we need to regain that. And so I think a lot of the work that we do in our lives and as coaches and mentors to people is to help them to consider different perspectives and to tune into what's really happening for them deep down. Because we all have a path to walk, I believe. And part of the work is simply to get back on that path. And the other side of it is the fear shouts, which is the brain kicking into action, which is the anxiety, the people pleasing, the justifications, the what if this will fail, this will never work, the self-doubt, the self-criticism, etc. And for me, that is an ongoing dialogue that at times can feel like a crisis or a hostage negotiation. It's not always a healthy, productive communication. It can feel intense at times. And so again, part of the practice for me, at least, is to put myself in a place where I'm better able and better equipped to have that dialogue in a way that feels easier, lighter, more productive, etc. All under the guise of laziness. So if I can do that well, then I can save time, and I have more time, which is the ultimate currency, to do things I want to be doing in this short life of ours.
Yeah, and I, the simplicity as well of it. You choose your suffering, and understanding why choose this one and where it takes you, and to that longer term pleasure, let's call it. There tends to be a greater pull if we can tune into what that is. We were kind of having almost a piece of this conversation yesterday on our group call. Someone being quite driven into fitness by fear, and it's very easy to be driven by pain, and it's a powerful motivator. Like, holy shit, I literally just got back from my physiotherapist before this conversation, right? And current pains are driving me there. But this is one of the things I love about my physio, by the way. But also I'm aware of it myself, is that he will sit with me and say, we want to get out of this, but where do you want to be? What do you want to be able to do with your body? Well, that's where we're going. And he is very solid on bringing me back to that point, because of course, if I get out of pain, I probably stop. And we've already had that, right? Like, the physio gives you the exercises for your ankle and these fiddly fucking things that you got to do, and then pain stops. And you're like, I'm glad I can stop those.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge distinction between stopping the pain and feeling good, right? And it's almost analogous to surviving or thriving. And it's one thing to not feel pain. And when you're in a lot of pain, like a lot of us are, whether we realize it or not, it's the first step to just stop that pain. In the same way, if you feel like you are drowning, the first step is to get your ass to dry land or a boat or a life preserver, right? It's like, no more pain, no more drowning. And the second step, now that you're out of pain, what is it like to get you to thriving, to you feeling good, right? And that's a very different set of requirements, right? It's like, let's get you swimming. And it's like, let's get you swimming well. Let's get you winning awards for swimming so good, right? And so I view that in that way. And then secondly, when you use the word pleasure, and I thought like that's a very, I like the word, and your intention, I think, is fine. But I just want to note that for many people, this idea of pleasure can be a trap, and that I think a lot of us pursue pleasure because we're trying to find fulfillment, and and in the same way, we're pursuing happiness, but what we really desire is wholeness, right? If we're feeling whole and wholehearted and we're feeling fulfilled, then I equate that with some very high level of aliveness. And I think pleasure, right? I've pursued a lot of pleasure in my life. I was really excellent at pursuing pleasure in the bottom of a bottle, on a beach, in another human, smoking, all of it. And it was blissful, but it was also very temporary. And so things like wholeness and fulfillment, this deep kind of knowing that you are where you are supposed to be, and that you are safe doing that, and that you are on your path, that to me is something more meaningful, at least right now in this iteration of where I am and what I'm pursuing.
Yes, thank you for that, and I'll explore that, because that in essence, that's bang on what I mean. And the use of the term pleasure there is a simple contrast to pain versus pleasure. Meaningful, long-term, grounded, in whatever it is, right? But the other side of that, based in meaning, based in purpose, based in our values, I think, for me, is what grounds me to that.
Yeah, and it doesn't, I'm not saying avoid pleasure. Like, pleasure is the best. I guess I'm just offering the idea that it's not the North Star, so to speak.
Yeah. And maybe the difference between short-term pleasure, short-term gratification, and longer-term meaning, and does gratification expand upon pleasure a little bit, as long as we have that long-term? And that's really so. I think, and that's essentially the point that I'm making.
Because I know that
I can chase the hit of the cake, or not going to the gym, and sometimes short-term pleasure is the absence of short-term pain.
100%. And biting my tongue biting my tongue is a form of pleasure, because I don't have to expose myself to the ramifications of truth, right? And avoiding the gym is a form of pleasure because I don't have to sweat and
Mm,
feel sore and do burpees and all that other shit.
mm,
But in a different perspective, from a different scale, to your point, there is an immense amount of pleasure in looking in the mirror and feeling healthy, or having an emergency situation and feeling strong enough to
mm,
act, or looking around your life and realizing that there are only phenomenal people that are close to you. Like,
mm.
that is a very different kind of pleasure. And I know that you have navigated life in a similar manner. I've heard some stories of who you used to be and how you used to live. And
An
I
old
think it's
skin
just
or two.
that holds skin. And I think that is also partially why we do the work that we do, right? And I know for our friend group, for many of us have a similar trajectory.
Mm,
Now I think we're trying to help people to feel less pain, waste less time, get to the knowledge quicker than we did, perhaps.
mm. Yeah, and create more meaning. You
Yeah.
spoke about this current iteration in our last conversation, Jeremy. You may recall we were speaking.
That's very sweet of you to suggest that, but if you
Because
asked me
I
for
did, it's been
five,
playing on my mind every day over the last 2
okay,
years.
yeah,
You spoke about chapters that you had. We have different chapters in our lives, and there was a chapter where we were talking about you as the kind of reformed scientist, and that was a chapter. You worked in the cubicle, you wore a shirt. There was a chapter, and now there's this new chapter that you in. So I think it was a couple of years ago.
mm.
It was kind of the solo life coach, writer, creator. Does that chapter still feel present for you? Is there another chapter ahead of you? What does that look like?
That chapter is still playing out, but I feel like maybe a different way to describe it is with levels. I feel like I'm
Mm-hmm.
banging my head against different levels. I'm like, oh, there it is again, there it is again. And so at the start of that chapter, when I had no idea how to work online, I had no idea how to be a life coach, and I'd never been on a podcast before, and I'd never hosted one, and I've never written a book. Like, all of those things felt like a grand adventure and
Mm,
so exciting and so fun. And now uh, it's lost its kind of luster. And so I think I'm perpetually trying to listen to those heart whispers and expand into the next version of what's calling me forward,
mm,
and to pursue that deeper fulfillment. And it's like, I don't know necessarily what that is, but I know that one of them, from a personal perspective, would be fatherhood, certainly. And I have I'm not mom, if you're listening, like, Kendra is not pregnant. I'm not in the process of attempting that, but as an example, uh, Mike is making rude, illicit gestures with his hands, everybody. Um, as an example, like, that's one, certainly. Like, I've never done that. That's going to be a crazy initiation,
mm-hmm.
wild, and I'm going to learn a lot of things about myself doing that. But another version of that would be, I've been writing a book for a year or two, and putting that out in the world will be another
Mm,
initiation. Different kind of micro levels in terms of trying to expand the work that I do, charging more, doing different things. So I'm perpetually sort of renegotiating, or not renegotiating. A, a way to describe it. So when I talk about the path or the path forward, I believe in this idea of taking the next invisible step on that path. And
mm,
I also like this idea that if you're following a well-worn trail or a well-worn path, then it might not actually be yours. It might mean that other people have been there before.
mm.
And so I
Yeah, maybe
like the
they've picked all
idea
the
of,
fruit at the end of that path too.
yeah, maybe that path just leads to a place where everybody goes to the bathroom and it stinks there and it's off trail. And it's like, oh,
It
Isn't what
feels
I
safe
thought I
going
was
there,
on.
but that's one of the things perhaps about the illusion of safety or maybe
Yeah.
familiarity.
Yeah, definitely. Or you're walking down a path and you hear something in the distance, or you see something through the trees, and it's like, I'm just gonna go poke my head over there and check it out. And maybe it opens up into some expansive meadow or a waterfall, or there's
Mm.
a all you can eat burrito bar or something cool. And it's like, oh, thank goodness that I was brave enough to take a chance on trusting that little nudge.
But how many burritos could you eat?
I mean, right now, I could probably do two. But I have pockets, Mike. So might take a couple
Oh,
away.
okay. I see.
Might bring you
Is
on,
that
you know?
crossing a line when it comes to the all you can eat
No.
parameters, do you think, to fill one's
Bro,
pockets?
there's no lines when it comes to burrito
There's no
bars.
lines.
Anything goes. It's pure
So
pleasure. Savage pleasure, Mike.
here we go. Until I pass the line of how much is enough, and I potentially enter into pain.
Yeah.
I want to go into two things there because I've got a question for you. No,
Okay.
I've got a point, but I want to expand on this because it's a story that I really like, and I've probably shared it maybe somewhere in the podcast before. But it's a friend of mine works in fitness, and he was kind of exploring this idea of pain versus pleasure, and reference to earlier points. I'm just going to use pleasure for the ease of the term. And he'd flown home to his mother's house and did what I think a lot of us might do when we might perhaps return to a parent's home. We go to the refrigerator, and have a look what's in there. And he saw this cake. They had a slice out of it, and he was like, very neutral, curiosity almost in his tone, not judgment. What's with the cake? And his mother and his sister was there. The mother said, "Oh, I wanted a piece of cake," and he was like, "Great. Did you enjoy it?" She said, "Yeah, it was beautiful." He was like, "Wonderful." He pulled it out of the fridge and he threw it in the trash. And they like fucking lost their shit. Whoa, what are you doing? And he said, "Well, you wanted the pleasure and of experience, the pleasurable experience of eating the cake. I'm saving you the pain of eating all of it, and potentially that'll lure you down the line." I was like, what a lesson. And what a brave man.
Yeah. I don't think my mom would like that at all.
But
Yeah.
segue. But coming back to the point earlier, there's an African proverb, and I'm not full of them. I know a couple that I really like, and it's this: "I build the road, and the road builds me." And when you were talking about that, it really brought that to mind for me, because I think it can have perhaps many meanings. I mean, that's what we do as humans, we make meaning. But for me, that's the kind of thing. It's like the path isn't always there, but as I keep taking the steps, it's really about who I become in the process.
100%. Yeah. And so I think a lot of us get distracted or overwhelmed or hyper focused on building that path at the expense of building ourselves, at the expense of listening to where we even want that path to be, at the expense of, do I need a rest right now? Can I do this differently? Can I ask for help? Why am I building this path? And then months, years go by. It's like, cool, I've got this really long path, but I don't even know where I am, or I don't even
I
want to
mean,
be
I'm
here.
not really versed in this, but is that kind of the premise of the Wizard of Oz? It's not about getting to Oz; it's about who you become in the process.
I mean, they did get to Oz, and they had that multicolored horse that
But it was kind
changed
of the letdown,
colors.
right? It was some dude behind the spoiler alert.
I mean, we could dissect the Wizard of Oz for the rest of this show if you like, Michael. I'm happy to do that. but
But
yeah,
yeah, it's not necessarily, like I get the medal, let's say, for building the path and getting to the end of it. I don't want to miss who I'm becoming in the process.
Yeah. And you're gonna have to fight some crazy monkey witches in the process. Like the
Obviously.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, right. We're talking. Hey, a quick interruption from me on this one. I'll keep it brief, I promise. And that's this. If you want to hear more from me, not only the deeper content where I go into some stories and some examples and some real education and depth, right? I love these podcasts, but we can go into depth. And that is in my weekly email newsletter, Mic Drops. That's what I call it. That's where I drop the mic and I drop all of my knowledge, my own stories, how I navigate shit, the stories of men that I work with and these things in my life to support you in getting your best, getting past your shit, and getting more from life, love, and the everyday. So wherever you find this podcast, find the link, subscribe to the newsletter, and I'll see you in there soon. And by the way, that's where you can interact with me directly. Just reply to emails and we can have a conversation. All right, back to the episode. So then let's segue the shit out of this in terms of chapters, because I'm assuming in writing there is a term. It's probably it's something like subchapters. You have a chapter. Iron John is a great book that I'm reading currently that has these. There'll be the primary chapter and then these kind of subchapter pieces. Now, in Iron John, he also talks about quite a few things. And one of those things is where he talks about there's kind of these stages that we go through. It's a great book on, I think, men and masculinity, by the way, if you want to explore mythology and so on. My yellow highlighter is working like mad in that thing second time through. And we don't need to go into the depths of this so much. I'm going to bring it back to you on a personal level in a moment. But he talks about, like there's the kind of the first stage, which is the attachment to the mother. And that's where a lot of people's lives halt, because that doesn't necessarily happen in perhaps the most amazing or effective way. And then there has to be the separation from the mother. And we've explored this as a group, this idea of in Iron John, he talks about the stealing of the key from under the mother's pillow and so on. And I know that one of the things that we've spoken about, and you did share briefly in our last conversation on the podcast, was your own experience growing up in a household that there was a divorce. You were very young. Your mother, was in a lot of pain and became an alcoholic. And you were sharing around like where a form of kind of codependency formed for you, which was, I'm just going to like lump it into a really simple term. My mother's in pain. I need to try and take that pain away. And it kind of sounds like there becomes an almost an enmeshment there with your mother's feelings are yours to deal with. And we did share how that kind of thing had popped up in different areas of your life and different relationships. Where would you say you're at with that now? And not necessarily that piece there, like I'm letting my partner have her emotions, maybe, but actually more so to the relationship with your mother.
Specifically my mom?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really believe that all moms should remain in pain, Michael. Is that No. So one of the things reflecting that, it's interesting to hear my life story kind of told to me as well. That's a unique experience, but you've summarized it really well. And I was thinking about on the other side.
I have to guess that I'm not doing it anywhere near justice, and I apologize to the people involved.
You've nailed it. But also on the other side, from my dad specifically, and I have wonderful step parents as well. From my dad, I kind of learned, we don't really talk about our pain. And so it's another form of an unhealthy, I think, way to manage your emotional experience and your struggles and your suffering. And so for my mom, it was the lesson that I kind of was taught, not intentionally, I would offer, but what I learned from being a young boy attempting to be a man was when women are in pain, when anyone is in pain, when anyone is sad, when anyone is going through something hard, then the job is to fix it as quickly as possible. The job is to stop the tears. The job is to soothe the pain. And adding that to some other things I learned from my dad and other people who, through no fault of their own, were doing this, was, we don't talk about our pain. We don't talk about our tears. We don't talk about our struggles. And so that is from
Was there an implicit message behind that? We don't talk about it because that would be shameful, weak. Was there?
I don't think there was an implicit message so much as like
we just don't do it
from a cultural component. Is like Seth Godin talks about, people like us do things like this. So it was almost like in this familial system, in this familial culture, like, you're my boy, like this is how we do it. And as a young kid, I'm sure you and others listening can relate. You kind of mirror your role models and the people that you're.
I have a 2.5-year-old who mirrors me all day, every fucking day. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Some of it is amazing. Daddy, what are you grateful to? And some of it is like, oh shit. Oops.
Where you and Dards look at each other like, who taught her that? Like,
oops, shouldn't have. Yeah, okay. Note to self. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I sort of, in a very oversimplified manner. You learn things growing up, and those things are really important to provide safety and belonging. And they do that until you kind of don't need them anymore and outgrow them. And so for me, growing up and becoming older and getting into relationships and being a boyfriend, etc., reading, learning, talking to people, it was like, oh shit, there's different ways of doing that. And as you get having a good long look at your life and yourself and your behaviors and your results, it's like, maybe some of this stuff doesn't serve me anymore. Like maybe it's okay to allow people to be in pain. Maybe it's okay to talk about my own pain. Maybe tears aren't poison to avoid at all costs. Maybe there's a different way to live and a different way to process and to converse. And so for me, it was partly about just being curious and, again, somewhat lazy in terms of trying to identify manners of living that gave me the best outcome in the easiest way possible. And then just trying.
It's not creating the most amazing results and experiences.
No.
There's got to be an easier way to live.
Yeah. Why
do you think that has always been there, or like, because we can step into Dr. Jeremy Goldberg's office and go super logical and scientific and like, of course it makes, why the fuck wouldn't you do that? Like, absolutely. And then you're confronted with the like, oh, fuck, this is going to be hard, and it requires courage. So there's obviously those two things coinciding for you. There's the desire for ease and laziness, and the willingness, therefore, to be courageous and brave, and quote, suffer, choose your suffering, that takes you to that. Has that been something that was there for the longest time?
No, and it's still not necessarily there. Like every day I get into the shower and I tell myself it's time for a cold shower at the end of this nice long hot one, and I stare at the stupid hot and the cold water, and I have a conversation with myself every damn day. It's like, I don't want to do this. Oh, you've been doing it so much. Don't turn the cold water on. Don't turn the hot water off. And so again, I think that integrity is an ongoing negotiation with yourself.
Yeah.
And that's at least my experience of it. And still, I'm in a relationship with a woman that I've been with for over 4 years now. And there is still a part of me that wants to run away, be an asshole, be codependent, roll my eyes, shout and scream and throw a tantrum. Like that part is certainly.
Oh, you don't do that?
Not as often as I used to, for sure. But I just want to really highlight that point, because so often you look on social media or you listen to podcasts like this, and these experts kind of present their lives as this shiny golden city, the Wizard of Oz castle. And it's like, yeah, sure. And, it's still an ongoing process. And I think that we do a great disservice to people when we only talk about how loving and fulfilled we all are. Like, I still deal with conflict. I still deal with shame. I say things I regret. I get out of integrity occasionally. I have to find my way back to my path. I skip cold showers. I sometimes don't meditate in the morning. Like, occasionally I'll eat some really unhealthy shit. Like, it happens. And so again, I think a big part of that process, though, is getting back on track quicker and quicker and quicker.
Yeah.
With more and more grace and forgiveness and understanding for myself.
Yeah. And I recognize that as being so crucial, right? Because we can almost overreact, and it makes it harder to get back in line. Yeah. And like perhaps one of the cliche ones is like with food or something, like, fuck it, I'll just start again next week, and we just make it harder and harder again, right? It's not an act of kindness towards oneself.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm off track and I'm making decisions that aren't fully aligned with my integrity, it does not help for me to yell at myself for being off track and for calling myself names for being off track. Like, what does help is getting my ass back on track as easily and quickly as possible. Like, that is what is helpful. All the shame sandwiches and the shit I'm throwing at myself and the criticism and all the rest, like that is just simply not helpful in my battle with reality.
Mm.
Like I
But
simply
it's
have to
common, I think.
surrender.
And one of the things I see enter into that for a lot of guys is we tend to want to be quite black or white with a lot of things, all or nothing. And being presented with something like that, we can be quick to go, so I'm just going to let myself away with everything. So then I am just going to stay off track. And it's like, well, that's the other end of the spectrum. Essentially what you've just described there is that nuance in the middle, which is like, no, I'm going to accept that I did that and I'm going to choose something different now.
Yes. Yeah, we have this binary thinking that gets us into traps and gets us stuck and keeps us in places that are not great to be. And even in the decision making is often based upon this false belief that there are only two ways of doing things. Either I'm off track or I'm off track. I'm on track. Either I'm good or I'm bad. Either I'm a good partner or a bad partner. And it's like, no, we contain multitudes, right? Life's complex. There's gray areas. You have 100 options to consider, right? And so part of the process for me is also practicing curiosity and perspective in terms of how I'm viewing my. What's another way to look at this? Catching the self-talk. Like, are you really an asshole right now? Or did you forget to bring something home from the store or whatever? No.
Yeah. And I think one of the beauties of perspective, like for me, my mind just goes straight into zooming out, like, am I good or bad in this moment? Well, okay, when I zoom out, what does that picture look like? One thing, I missed a meal, I didn't bring the thing home, right? It doesn't excuse that thing, but it can help us have a bit more grace with ourselves, I think.
100%. Yeah.
So, Jeremy, I know that you are starting. That feels too, I don't know what tense you call that. I'm not very good at English, but you're big on kindness, and you used to say, do you still say, I'm starting a kindness revolution?
I have that on my Instagram. I used to say, I'm trying to make kindness cool. And somebody once came up to me and said, well, just stop trying and just start making it cool.
Yeah.
So I think I've amended my Instagram.
Do or do not, there is no try.
I'm making kindness cool and compassion commonplace.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And I can hear that in fact, knowing you, but even those examples there of like, oh shit, I'm off the path. How do I get back on? Like, it's an act of kindness to invite yourself back in. And even to the point earlier of, our text thread and getting to the gym, one of the acts of kindness there was listening to the invitation, the whisper from the accountability of the men around you. That was a different conversation. To come back in to line, and you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to go to the gym. That act of kindness there. So, to Jeremy Goldberg in the current 2023, I had to check the year for a second there in my head. Skin. What are the big challenges? Like, what are the things that actually, I could look at your social media. Okay, first of all, I could look at your social media, I'm just going to say this broadly, and go like, Jeremy's great, he's amazing, and he must meditate every day and all the pieces before. And then obviously I look at your social media and I see the Spirit Airlines situation, which perhaps we can get a little insight on.
We have the bag, Mike.
Hey,
it was resolved. Like,
oh well, I haven't been on social media yet today, so
the saga is done. But anyway, so sorry to interrupt you. You're asking, what am I working on now?
If we were to get the behind the scenes in some level, without going into things that are private in your life that we don't see, in the world of, let's say, social media, what are the things that can really challenge you? And certainly in an internal way as well. What are things that a lot of people, especially my audience, can struggle with? Doubt, fear of judgment, rejection. You've spoken about people pleasing in the past, that thing of like, need people to like me. Where and how do those things come up?
Short answer, I struggle with everything that the person listening to struggles with. Like, I literally have a program called Get Shit Done 101, which is about habits and rituals that help you not procrastinate and be productive. And I'm really good at procrastination, and that sometimes bites me in the ass. I have another program that I've been working on based on a workshop that I taught, which is all about imposter syndrome and how to manage the inner dialogue to feel less like an imposter and step forward and own your shit and take up space. And I still face that quite frequently. And fear, doubt, yeah, financial stress, relationship stress, worry about dying, worry about the future. Like these are all right in my wheelhouse. And I don't know how else to say that, but in terms of specific examples, like I've been working on this book for probably a year and a half or 2 years, and it's been really challenging, and it's going really slowly, and it is an initiation process for sure.
Is there a common way that you navigate when those challenges become more obvious and present?
To just sit down and do the damn work is basically the short answer. Longer answer would be to try to understand why I'm making certain decisions and what the beliefs are that form the foundation of those decisions. I believe that beliefs are choices. I also believe that they are really important in terms of affecting our attitudes, our emotions, our relationships, etc. And so when I'm feeling resentment, when I'm feeling distracted or procrastination or fear, it's a really good opportunity for me to expose myself to the deeper beliefs that I might not even realize I have. They might be subconscious or they might be conscious. And so I feel like even though that project is really challenging and it's taking a long time, but it's also right on time, and it is illuminating lots of things that I need to see before I can get where I'm supposed to be going. Like sometimes the path feels like quicksand covered in concrete underneath a pile of rocks, and it can feel hard, but I think there are ways to make it feel less difficult. And one of those ways is going back to the beginning, like surrounding yourself with good humans who can support you and talk you through it, and people that you can lean on in times of strife or struggle.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. There's that little, I suppose, element of humility and like, oh, maybe I can't navigate all of this myself, and there's people that I can at least share some stuff with that could potentially just mirror it back or say like, that sucks, bro.
Yeah, or people that have done it before, people that have forged their own path in a similar way that I'm trying to do. Like I'm certainly not the first guy that's written a book. I'm certainly not the first person that has struggled with procrastination and hypocrisy. Like there's only so many things that we can all feel, and I think that we're all experienced and fluent in each of those things at some point. And I think there's something liberating about recognizing that it's happened before to people like me, and they have dealt with it in hundreds or thousands of different ways. And so what can I learn from those experiences, and what choice am I going to make? I'm just trying to make better choices, Mike. I think that is the synthesis of my life in this moment. I am just continually trying to make better choices.
I think a lot of us will resonate with that one. So to close, I feel like we have to visit the Spirit Airlines. I wouldn't have to, but I would love to.
Do you have Spirit Airlines in
Saga?
Australia? You don't, right?
No.
So
But I think people can recognize very low budget, very low quality air
This
travel.
is the hill that I die on now. Is if most of your people are based in Australia, New Zealand.
But there's plenty of people in the US.
So I had a situation with Spirit Airlines. In that situation, let's call it a relationship because it's gone on for over a month now. But that situation has resolved today. Spirit Airlines has lost my bag for 33 days, but now it is back in my possession and life goes on. But it has been an ongoing social media battle that I've been waging against them. And this taught me a lot about acceptance and forgiveness and understanding. And it was also a nice reminder that companies are built up of individuals, and that we have to remember that those individuals that we interact with at all times, in all places, have hearts and hopes and pain and stress and families and loss. And so I want to reiterate my ongoing battle with Spirit Airlines is with the corporation as a whole and the systems and policies therein, and that I have nothing but love for the employees of that airline and the people doing their best to do their best. But I don't recommend using Spirit Airlines ever. Personally.
I mean, it feels like a great way to end the show.
Maybe you could get them as a sponsor for this one.
Right?
Yeah.
Brought to you by.
You know what I was going to do? I was talking to Kendra the other day because I have a podcast also. And I said I was going to make a funny advert at the beginning and be like, this episode is sponsored by every airline on the planet except for Spirit fucking Airlines. This podcast is not sponsored by them, and have a little tirade. But to wrap it up, I wanted to thank you and the work that you're doing. And thank you for being my friend. And thank you for being a good man with high integrity and somebody that's doing good work. And it's just really nice to have somebody in my life that I routinely tell people to go and follow and to go and, suggest content to. So thanks for being awesome, man.
I appreciate that. I received that, and I will mirror it back. I get so much joy from your writing and your creativity coming to life in the various forms, writing being one of them. So yeah, by the way, of course, if you're not following Jeremy, definitely go and do that. Gia, thank you so much for the time today. I know we went over a little bit. I appreciate you. And the grace for me getting my body seen to, a little bit of panel beating, as my physio calls it. Thank you so much, Jer. I'm so happy for you that you have your suitcase back. Is it all intact? Everything's in there?
Everything is there. There's just a bonus aroma that we didn't package.
Oh yeah,
when we departed a tropical island country. So
yeah, it's over a month. That's
not quite fresh and clean anymore, but
not quite. Diplomatic way of describing it.
Yeah.
Jeremy Goldberg, thank you for coming on the show. You absolute legend.
Yeah, brother.
You've been listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. If this podcast has benefited you, if you enjoyed this, then my request, my invitation is to share this with a man that you think will also benefit from this and enjoy this. Remember, please, wherever you find your podcast, you like us, subscribe to us, click download first, leave us a review. All those things both make sure you get all the updates when they come in, and it supports us in getting this podcast in front of more everyday men that could use it. Until next time, I've been Mike Campbell. Remember to build that legendary integrity. And remember, everyday men, we thrive when we are championed, when we are supported, when we are appreciated and recognized for who we choose to be in the world. Here is my invitation to both show up and be that everyday legend, and to continue to champion the everyday men in your life.